Welcome, everyone, to another edition of What Drives You. I'm one of the hosts of the show. I'm Stan Windhorn, and with me, almost as always, is my buddy Carl.
Thank you, Stan.
All right. Well, we have a guest today. Carl, I'm going to set this one up a little bit for you. When you and I first met, we used to hang out at a place called Zingers, which was close to our office. It was owned by a guy named Alan MacArthur. When Zingers closed, he opened up another place that he called MacArthur's, and it uh, it lasted for a little while. But then all of a sudden, I saw this restaurant that took the place of MacArthur's. It's called the Gramercy, and I have been a regular customer there ever since. Ever since. So I want to welcome to What Drives You, Billy Joe Hunt, who is the owner of the Gramercy. Billy Joe, welcome to What Drives You.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate you having me and happy to be here.
Awesome. All right. Well, I've got some questions for you, but before I do, I just want to set the stage for everybody because one of the things that I really love about the Gramercy, and I want to hear about maybe who is responsible for that, but the atmosphere in there is very unique. It's perfect for first dates, which I've had a few of those there at the Gramercy, but it's just got a cool, it's almost a steampunk vibe, but just the setting is really nice. So before we get into too much about how you got started in the Gramercy, who is responsible for the redecoration there, and how did you come up with all these great ideas?
Well, the original concept for the Gramercy was the families. Me and my wife had an idea about opening up sort of an elevated bar experience within Lakeway. And while the idea was ours, we didn't necessarily have the vision to make it come to life. I can't take any credit for how the Gramercy looks and feels. We were smart enough to kind of engage with a consultant company who had just a myriad of talent under their umbrella, everything from, marketing people to menu development to construction folks. And one of the services they offered was around doing a build out, doing an interior design. So we selected that because we were pretty light in that skill set. And thankfully we did because we feel like we hit a home run and because the gentleman who helped us was just this great visionary and super talented. He not only was really good at interior design, but he was also an architect and he was also like a construction GM. So, I mean, he basically had so much skill set that he brought the concept to life that we wanted to, and we couldn't have been happier with how it ultimately played out.
That's cool. Well, a lot of the guests we've had on this show would congratulate you for that because sometimes our success is in finding people with the expertise that maybe we don't have ourselves. One of the things I really love about the interior, and I don't know how he came up with this idea, but in one section of the room, there's some nice couches and places to sit, very comfortable place. But they're basically picture frames hanging from the ceiling. They're painted gold and they're all at different angles and stuff. And I mean, I just love the creativity of that look. Um, but one of the unique things about the Gramercy is you decided to open up this unique bar slash restaurant right in the middle of COVID. So I got to know what drove you to making that kind of a bold move.
Yeah, so it's easy to say now that we had this a tremendous amount of courage to open during a couldn't have been a more challenging time, but that wouldn't be the truth. We started the journey long before COVID was a thing, and it was probably a case of the worst timing in human history. But it is
Mm.
what it is, and once a train starts rolling, it's hard to stop. And I don't know that in retrospect, had we knew the implications of COVID and how it basically shut down the world, would we have continued? So it just played out the way it played out. And we were very fortunate again to engage with a consulting group that was smart enough to help us kind of navigate through all that. And now, 4.5 years later, we're very fortunate to still be open, and we have a great story to tell. But I wish I had a playbook to say this is how you navigate a global pandemic. We just don't.
Yeah. Oh, so you were making the plans to open before COVID hit. How much of a delay did that cause, if any?
So literally, we signed our lease in January of 2020, and by then, coronavirus was becoming part of the vernacular. It was on the news, and you
Yeah,
felt like, wow, this is interesting. Maybe this will pass. And we were scheduled to open in March of 2020, and that might have been a little ambitious, but that was our goal. Literally, that's when the entire world shut down. So of
right,
course, you immediately start talking to the landlord and trying to negotiate some things in your favor, just being realist and saying there's no way we could open. I mean, nothing's allowed to be open. There were also some very specific rules that started to come out. Different, local governments were stating rules about what types of establishments could be open, depending on their alcohol sales versus food sales. But because we were brand new, we weren't quite sure what exactly we, fit into. So it
mm,
was very challenging to try to navigate a lot of lack of information, I guess. And so it was just so hard. And then in the local scene and within Austin, and you had a governor who was fighting with the mayor, and you didn't know what to do. You just did the best you could and try to respectfully follow the rules that you did hear about. And then ultimately, it was just very confusing for our guests who didn't know what was allowed or would we be even open. But
right,
ultimately, we ended up opening in October of 2020, October 9th. And I remember that day fondly because it's actually was my 50th birthday. So we didn't obviously plan it that way. That's just the way it played out. And it almost felt like just a perfect alignment of the stars that the very first business venture I've ever gotten into, the very first, obviously, restaurant or bar we ever opened. Literally, our opening day ended up being on my 50th birthday. So it's a special day. Monumental day, and certainly something I'll never forget.
yeah. So that kind of led me into one of my next questions. I was going to ask, have you ever been in the restaurant business? Have you been an entrepreneur before? What did you do prior to Gramercy, and what drove you then to taking this risk?
Yeah, so for the first part of your question, I never owned a bar restaurant. I never owned any business for that matter, but I always had kind of an entrepreneurial itch, something that drove me to say one day I want to do something. I didn't know what that was. So for a lot of years, I explored some different ideas. I had some wild ones from car washes to, a Chuck E. Cheese franchise to coin operated laundry. I mean, I considered just about everything. I just felt
Mm,
like, and I kind of have this in me. I want to try it. Specific to the bar and restaurant, my father was a bartender as a kid, and I kind of remember those times fondly being basically babysat at the bar, where he's behind the bar and I'm just there keeping busy trying to play pool or play pinball or just anything. And I always thought it was pretty cool. There's the phone on the side of the wall where when it rings, some sketchy looking guy answers because you find out, oh, he's the bookie, sitting down at the corner of the bar. It was just kind of cool. It was something kind of romantic about it. And, folks would come over and they would just cook up a bunch of food for people to eat and just seemed like a really kind of fun atmosphere. And so ultimately that's what I tried, but having zero experience in the field. What I did do for a living, I worked in IT for a long time, 25-year career, did very well. I actually worked for pretty large companies. I worked for Pfizer for almost 18 years. Ironically,
right.
as COVID hit,
Yeah.
I worked for the company that now became part of. Everyone was aware of Pfizer at that point, but I think before that, maybe a lot of folks didn't know who Pfizer or the company Pfizer was, and I worked there for almost 2 decades. So yeah, my career was entirely in IT prior to the restaurant industry.
Man, that says a lot about you. I mean, first of all, maybe this is why you and I get along so well, is a lot of the things that you had thought about as a serial entrepreneur, I thought about just about every one of those. In fact, looked into a lot of those as well. Where was the bar that you grew up around? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, I was born and raised in New York City, specifically the Bronx, and so the bar was literally sort of across the street, catty corner from the building that we lived in the Bronx.
So that's not a Texas accent you got? I
Yeah.
get a little confused at times.
No, it's funny, I hear that a lot about my accent. I think once upon a time I had a New York City accent, but I think after I joined the military, I traveled around a little bit. I lived in Oklahoma and I lived in Kentucky, and Then the family moved out to California for almost 20 years. Somewhere along the line, I lost my good New York City accent. So now it's a mix of things, I guess. And maybe I'm picking up a little bit of Texas twang in the last 5 years since I've been here.
You do have kind of a good mix. I've been a professional voiceover artist for many years. I'm usually tuned into accents, and I would have had a hard time ever guessing where you grew up.
Well,
Um,
my name's
okay.
a kind of a misnomer, named Billy Joe. I don't think I may be the only one who's ever been from the Bronx named Billy Joe. So my mom and dad had some foresight by naming me that, and so I was like, well, I guess I'm destined to live in Texas someday.
That is true. You don't think about that being a New York name for sure. Carl, I saw you took yourself off of mute. Did you have something you wanted to ask?
Yeah, Billy Joe, when Stan, we were talking about guests and who we were going to have on, and he was telling me about a little bit about you. I was like, what in the world is this guy going to share about a restaurant? But the bravery, we all know, right, that restaurants and bars are one of the hardest things
Uh,
to run, just in regards to personnel, right? There's so many things beyond your control. If you're not a chef, right, you get the wrong chef and you can screw it up. If you're not a bartender, you get someone who thieves from you. But there's also, I've got a good friend who's got a couple restaurants, a bunch of partners, but big ones in Chicago and in Scottsdale. And he makes a mint, but his experience, Billy Joe, and what Stan was talking about, and the environment when you get to your place is just amazing. So good job on that. Good job on listening to the Council of Advisors, and it's just amazing that you survive, because most businesses, any business fails within the first 1 to 3, right? And you've made it past that and through this global epidemic, which we're never going to know how many restaurants closed, I don't think,
Right.
ever in that 2-year window. So good job.
No, I appreciate that, Colin. In a lot of ways, we feel like we're still on the journey, and we still make a lot of mistakes, and we still learn every single day. I think a big part of whether it's a restaurant industry or any industry, if you're trying something for the first time, you have to lean on expertise that you don't have. I mean, you have to have the humility to just raise your hand and say, hey, I don't know this, and I have to ask the dumb questions until I learn. Um, you know, you can't just kind of go at it and think you're going to figure it out. I think especially in the restaurant business, because it does have such a long history of failure, and folks who are a lot smarter than me certainly could cook better than me. We're not successful, so we're pretty humbled by that story we have to tell so far. But again, we still feel like we're on the journey every single day. So.
But the fact that you're there with, Stan tells me families all involved and you're there every day speaks volumes to how you've got to stay on top of a business like this to make it successful. I had a car dealership where we had to bring in a partner, and we had another global thing, which was 9/11 that hit us. And so we had to pivot. So having those experts in, bringing the right people, right? I don't know if you guys watch The Prophet or follow Marcus Lemonis at all, but his people, process, and product thing, I think, applies to any industry. So yeah, it's just being there hands-on 24/7 is probably the key. Doesn't hurt that you're in one of the fastest growing markets and coolest places, I believe, in the country right now, that Austin area. But yeah, it's also, you're all the experience that you had in life. Doing this later in life helps too, because you're a lot wiser than if you tried to do this when you're 25. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think too, you hinted at something before in terms of the challenges with personnel, and that remains one of our greatest challenges since opening. And initially, you put it off to the pandemic that, well, folks just aren't working, and there's just this bizarre set of circumstances where people are home, and there was a lot of fear. But once that sort of was passed and over, and we sort of got past all of the unemployment and all those things, I don't know that it's actually gotten that much better. One thing that has gotten better is maybe some of the quality of talent. But at the end of the day, the volume of talent is just not there. I mean, it's something we struggle with every single day, and we're literally struggling with it now. So another thing you touched on, Carl, was the aspect of family, and I think that's where we have a major advantage maybe over some other businesses, because our place is literally filled with family members who work there, so You know, my wife is there often, helping us in the kitchen. I have three sons, and two of them are there basically full time running the restaurant, and they've done every single role you could think. And so it helped them learn quickly. And now we've sort of elevated their roles to help me in different ways to kind of give me a little bit of bandwidth to focus on some other things. But without the family, it would have been impossible, because you just can't find the help to get it all done.
You know, that was actually leading me to a question because one of the things that I've always enjoyed and Billy Joe, I think you and I met one of the first times I was ever there, and I always love the fact that your sons are there and they're always, you know, it's kind of like you come in, it feels like Cheers. The people when you come in, they always make you feel glad that you're there, like they're glad that you're there. And you know, I've met your wife and everything, but there's been some other family members too. I could swear like there was an uncle or something from some other country or something. I don't remember exactly, but you've had more than just the immediate family helping you out there, right?
Oh, it's a true story. I mean, I basically touched on kind of the, let's call them the full-time members, but we've had so much extended family that's helped us. My nephew, Brandon, he had helped us in the kitchen before. My niece, Miranda, has been a host. My sister worked in the front. She was actually our initial host that we hired. She worked for us for a while. I mean, my other son has been in there doing dishes. We've had family members who've stopped by maybe during a visit who have helped, you know, mother-in-law cleaning restrooms. I mean, it's basically an all-in approach, and that's what it takes. And I would be remiss if I actually didn't mention my brother-in-law, Danny, because he's always been a tradesman, a construction professional, and during our build out, he actually moved to Austin from Nevada to help us with the build out, and he was just an invaluable resource. First, because he's very talented and he works hard, but we got him on the cheap because he was family. So he spent, I think, at least a month at the restaurant, and gosh, his hands are all over it in terms of actually executing the design plan that we had talked about earlier. So yeah, to your point, Stan, you are not wrong. Just about every family member who's ever came by the restaurant has helped us in one way or another. So
I think that's really fantastic. It's not always easy to work with family members, especially in a high stress kind of a situation like that when, you know, in the restaurant business in particular. But yeah, I commend you on that. So we were talking about how hard it is to find good help. And I don't think that that is a unique issue right now with the service industry, restaurants in particular, but it's certainly in the restaurant business, it shines a light on it because you know you're just sometimes you're just wondering if anybody has ever even trained some of these people. And if I go into a restaurant, which by the way has never happened at the Gramercy, which this is where I'm going with this, if I get a waiter or waitress, you know, they don't have really the personality for it, or if they can't remember what you ordered, or they bring you your food and they haven't brought you your silverware yet, all these things. I don't blame that person. I blame the management because they obviously haven't had anybody who's trained them and are overseeing what's happening in that. So this is another compliment that I'll give to the Gramercy is it's always, I know they're hard to find, but you seem to be pretty good at picking good people.
yeah, I mean, and it's an imperfect science. You know, we try to hold our staff to some standards, and unfortunately, I think the restaurant and bar industry is rife with outfits that operate without any standards. And so, one of the advantages coming into the industry as a as a novice with zero experience at all is that we're not preconditioned with some of the kind of standard behaviors that you see in bars and restaurants, right? So when people ask us, you know, what's been your secret sauce? Like, how have you been successful? Like, how'd you pull this off in the pandemic? And the first thing, of course, is the family. You know, I had all that internal help, but the second thing is like, well, we're actually running like a business. You know, we don't allow people to drink on the job.
Yeah.
It's illegal, you know. So why is that common in the business? I just don't understand. It's like our job is to make sure that we're serving people responsibly, and we have to look out for them. How could we do that if we're not clear-headed at the time of working? So sadly, that type of kind of holding people to standards and holding them accountable, um, there's a lot of folks who don't want to work with that level of, expectation, I guess. And so they're sometimes short-lived. But the ones who do want to learn and want to learn how to be a professional and actually do a good job, those are the folks who really enjoy working at the Gramercy. And their goal to us. I mean, it's somebody who sort of sticks it out and manages to deal with us and hold them to standards and documentation and just a level of professionalism that we shouldn't have to ask about, like showing up on time and not being clear-headed and being in the right uniform and those types of things. Things I didn't ever have to worry about in my previous career, but I've had to learn a lot. So if they survive sort of the initiation with us, then they find that it can be a pretty fun place to work.
Yeah. Well, last time you and I talked at the Gramercy, and I'm sure this isn't the first time I've said it, but I'm like, you need to open up another Gramercy closer to me so I don't have to drive all the way out there. And your answer's always been, it's hard enough finding enough people
Yeah.
for this one.
Well, yeah, it's true. And I think my initial response maybe a couple of years ago was, Stan or whoever was asking, like, we're just trying to figure this one out. We're trying to dial this one in first.
Yeah.
Maybe develop a model that would be repeatable, where we could sort of say, okay, we figured out all the things not to do. Here's how we can go forth and be successful in another place. And some of that is kind of a documentation set and ensuring all your processes are dialed in and you know all the systems that you need to be successful. And then if you can plug and play the right people, you can go forth and maybe do a second location or more. I think now we are not quite where I would like to be in terms of all the processes and all the documentation, but we've made a lot of headway in the 4+ years. So now it's a little bit more realistic to say we could consider another location, but the people aspect will always be there as, man, how do you crack that nut? And I don't know that Lakeway presents some, unique challenges. It's almost like it's just far enough away from Austin that there's not enough incentive for people to come from the city out to Lakeway, right? They can probably find an equitable type situation. And especially when you got, the boss man there is telling you, hey, you got to show up on time to work and you're not allowed to do a shop before your shift starts, so
Well, I would think that may be part of your challenge too, is Lakeway is a very affluent area. For those of you who are listening that aren't from this area, it's north of Austin. It's on Lake Travis, my beloved lake. And it's an affluent area. So you're probably not getting a lot of help, maybe, I'm guessing, that actually live in Lakeway, because the people who live in Lakeway are, they're, especially the younger people, they've kind of grown up with a silver spoon and maybe don't want to have a job.
Yeah, and it's, you don't want to stereotype everyone in the community, but certainly I think there is an aspect of that. And to your point, a lot of the folks who do work for us do come from outside of the city. They commute in from far away. My chef, he commutes from Pflugerville. I mean, that's a
Oh
heck
man,
of a commute to do every
yeah.
day. We're very fortunate to have somebody who's willing to commit to the restaurant daily from that distance. So it does present some unique challenges to the community, but it's a wonderful place. And honestly, we moved to the community very blindly, not really knowing a whole lot about it. And we feel very fortunate that, we couldn't have chosen better for us to state, especially because of the pandemic. And then secondly, specifically to the city of Lakewood, the community has just been wonderful to us. But I think those challenges of hiring from within the city are just gonna remain.
Billy
Yeah,
Joe,
Carl and I met when in a company, and our offices were not far from there. They were in Bee Cave, and a lot of the people that needed to be hired were traveling from great distances, kind of like you said too, because that's just an expensive area to live. What, Carl? What were you going to say or ask?
well, two quick things about just about hiring. And Stan, I don't know if there's something going on with your mic, but there's like this weird second echo right behind when you're talking. So I don't know which mic you have on. I don't know, Billy Joe, if you're hearing that from Stan, but I'm hearing it on when you just specifically Stan when you talk. So sorry about that. But Billy Joe, do you think two things that it made me think of? Do you think you would be as successful if you didn't have the discipline you had mentioned earlier, and thank you for your service, the military. Do you think if you didn't have that discipline of following the rules and perseverance, do you think you'd have survived COVID? And then the second part to that is, which is similar to the auto space, the turnover in the auto business, which is where Stan and I kind of cut our teeth, is in the sales department, which is sales is kind of the servers, right? Is like 65%. The turnover is bonkers. And there's a lot of similarities from the training aspect to the discipline to the showing up on time, all that stuff. And I don't know that anyone's figured out how to solve for that. So I know that's two kind of different questions, but if you could touch on those two things, I'm
Yeah,
curious.
I think, Carl, absolutely. I mean, obviously your innate skill set, who you are as a person, may help drive your success or failure. And for me personally, I am very much a disciplined person. I think I work well with regimen. I work well with structure. I think it actually started probably before the Army. My dad was fairly strict and about certain things, and just as one example, he was a stickler on, hey, when the sun went down, you came home. You were home for dinner, and maybe that was just something related to do to the area we were in. But at the end of the day, I knew I better be home when the sun went down. I was home, and so when that becomes sort of the norm, it's a good thing. And I don't touch on it as a negative thing at all. I think it actually only helps young folks to have some structure and have some rule sets that you have to respect. And if that instills some disciplined behavior in your life, then better for it. So, I absolutely appreciated my time in the military. It was really good for me at the time, and helped me pay for school, and there were so many lessons in terms of, sometimes you just have to do things that you don't feel like doing, but you don't have a choice to say no. You just have to get the job done and, accomplish the mission kind of mindset. And so that certainly helped. But then even throughout my career, as you kind of grow in your career and you get more responsibility and more leadership opportunity, again, there's projects, there's missions that you have to accomplish, and being a disciplined, sort of structured person just helps drive a lot of positive change. So all those things. I also I coached a lot of youth sports for a number of years when I was living out in San Diego, and started coaching Pop Warner football, and eventually graduated and became the head coach of a local high school freshman team, and ultimately JV head coach. And man, I learned more doing that than probably anything else in my career, in terms of the need to be organized and disciplined and learn how to communicate to kind of a pretty challenging, diverse audience. So all of those factors have certainly helped me just kind of guide how I operate and what makes me, at my best. And I guess I realize it's not for everyone, and everyone is built like me, but it certainly helped me.
I had no idea that you were a high school football coach. See, you learn things here on What Drives You.
Well, people think I hate sports because I don't allow sports on the TVs at the Gramercy. And we just kind of, as a family, laugh about it because you couldn't find a more sports fanatic family than the Hunts.
Uh,
But we respect our concept. And it's like, man, all these pretty ladies that come to the Gramercy, and, you touched on being a good date night spot. The last thing a first time date wants to do is see their, prospective person overlooking their shoulder because the Knicks are wrong. They want to focus on who's in front of them. So we honor that concept, and like, yeah, we'll save sports for outside of the Gramercy.
yeah, that would definitely not fit with the atmosphere. And the atmosphere overall, for me, is what is the coolest part about the Gramercy. Well,
Stan,
this is really great. Oh, sorry, Carl, go ahead.
Stan, do you have any data? Because it sounds like Billy Joe's got a little uh, good method there to his madness, and you could be a great white paper for him. Success from first dates to second dates going to the Gramercy, right? Because there's no sports distraction. See where I'm going with this, Stan?
Yeah, I do. And you can keep your little comments to yourself there, Carl. I don't know how many times Billy Joe's ever seen me there on a second date, but we'll save that for another. This is not what this particular channel's about. So
Yes, yes.
Well,
We do have an idea though, Billy Joe, for that. Just so you know, on a different channel, different guidance, different
I'll
learnings there.
say this, we instill this in our team as well. there's a level of discretion that you must maintain when you work at the Gramercy because you might see some stuff that you definitely don't want to repeat to somebody else. So
Thank
I
you,
don't know
Billy
if
Joe.
Stan's ever been there on a second date. I'm not sure.
Good,
That's
good
funny.
answer. Good answer.
That's funny. Also, I kid. All right. Well, listen, Billy Joe, this has been great. At the end of every one of our episodes, we like to ask a few questions. I'm going to turn it over to my buddy Carl, and Carl,
Okay.
go ahead.
Yeah, so we kind of have a quick fire round. Stan kind of warned you in the pre-game discussion, but it's this channel started out to be about cars because Stan and I both have many, many years in the car business. But then as we've grown it and adapted, we've kind of just said, hey, that's kind of limiting the car business because a lot of what we talk about and discuss for this, even this conversation here, applies to other industries and other verticals. So we said, hey, let's make it more about what drives you to get off your hinder in the morning and to succeed in life and to do better and be better as a person. So we also have these three pillars, which are education, entertainment, and encouragement. And so I would think from you, what I've been encouraged about is, man, you could go from a totally opposite industry, nothing related to food and bar, and succeed. I mean, like you said, you wouldn't recommend that for everybody. But that's really powerful that you could do it, and it's a great story to share out there that it's doable. So thank you.
Just the guts alone to do it is admirable.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate that. And I will say that I have such a newfound respect for anyone who tries any business because nobody gives you that playbook that says this is how you become successful. There's just none out there. You have to figure it out along the way and make some mistakes and again, fill up those knowledge gaps where you need. I do want to make one other comment that Carl mentioned in terms of the education piece. I think that is so important. And it's one of the things that has always helped me it doesn't matter whether it was the Gramercy or anything, but when I try to get involved with a new thing, because it's interesting to me, whether it's a hobby, whether it's a work related thing, I just feel like that education piece is so valuable. You have to go out there and just learn as much as you can. And that takes a lot of different forms. There's obviously a vast amount of information that's available in 2025. You don't have to look too hard to find out what you need, but if it means having a conversation with somebody who's doing something that you're interested in or joining some network thing, I mean, whatever it is, it's only going to help. And that was part of my approach as well. I went to a conference, bar and restaurant conference to learn more. And so I figured, well, my small investment of time and money to go to this conference may be a decision point for me to say, you know what, I went, I tried it, not for me, I'm going to move on. But for me, it actually ended up being the opposite. Being around people that were so passionate about the industry only excited me more to actually educate myself more. So the education piece cannot be understated. It's so important.
Yeah, and there's a thing, not to go too far down a rabbit hole, but in the auto space, because a lot of owner operators like you can't be gone for days at a time, right? To go learn and train and get mentored and all that. But there's a system that the National Automobile Dealer Association has put together called a 20 group. And basically it's a bunch of guys with separate markets, so you're not a competitor, right? You travel to one destination, there's a mediator, and you all kind of share private information and successes and failures. And it's a really cool thing that the franchise dealers have done, and it really helps kind of just, you're not the only one going through, Billy Joe, what you're going through today,
Absolutely.
tomorrow. And so half of that is just going, man, I feel like I'm the only one, but nope, there's other people and people that have been doing it for 20, 30 years who can just laugh at the struggles that you have and say, hey, you're going to get through it, buddy. Just hang in there and it'll be okay. So, all right. So here's our quick car questions, our little nuggets here. What was, Billy Joe, your first car that you owned?
Oh, okay. My first car was a 1982 Toyota Corolla. My grandmother helped me buy that. It was a little white four-door, and it was, I mean, the true definition of a hoopty. Just a little tiny kind of bucket car to get to and from school. I was going to college at the time in New Rochelle, and was able to kind of just scoot back and forth in my little car. And what I remember most about it was, of course, I enjoyed it. It was cool, to have a car, but it used to get broken into all the time. So I'd come come downstairs and my trunk would be open and whatever I had in there was gone. I literally had gas siphoned out of it. So I kind of remember that it was always getting broken into, but it's just a hazard of the area. Eventually, I got smart and stopped keeping things in it.
You shouldn't have painted the target on it.
Yeah,
That was
right.
your mistake, you know? Go ahead,
That's my
Carl.
car.
All right, your what was your favorite car in all the cars you've owned? Again, you're catching
Yeah.
up. You know, you just mentioned your 50th birthday, so you probably had a few rigs by now. But what was your favorite?
Yeah, I'll mention two briefly, but one is certainly stands out as my favorite. But I had a 1967 Lincoln Continental. It wasn't a convertible and it wasn't any type of show car, but it was just cool. It was old school, suicide doors. It was like having a cruise ship on wheels. I mean, that was kind of a fun car when the kids were small. We'd put some Frank Sinatra on the radio and just kind of cruise around. It was awesome. I think a lot of that actually helped drive sort of some of the concept of the Gramercy even today, where we play all Dean Martin and a lot of Rat Pack tunes from 4 to 6 every single day. Just that
Yeah.
old mentality I thought was awesome. But my favorite car ever was I bought a 2011 Jaguar XJL supercharged. I've always loved Jags. Always thought they were just stylish and cool. Couldn't wait to own one. Got a big promotion at work and finally pulled the trigger on it, and it was just amazing. Even now, thinking back, a 14-year-old car, I mean, it had every possible option you could think of. It was like sitting in a spaceship. It was just amazing. And sad story, I actually sacrificed it moving to Texas and opening the bar. I was like, yeah, I can't afford this anymore. So I got rid of it to open the
Oh,
Gramercy.
Well, that leads me to question number three, which is what's your dream car? Maybe it's that one to have it again, or a newer version.
Yeah, I think I'd probably do a combination of the both, an older Jag, like a 1960s MK2 or something big bodied, just with a little bit of class, also classic. I think that'd be perfect. And honestly, it's attainable, it's not something I could, some ridiculous ride that I'll never own. If I put my mind to it and kind of saved up some pennies, I could probably make that happen someday.
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
interesting because a lot of the guests, we ask that question, and a lot of times their dream cars are the, $500,000
Yeah.
Ducati or whatever. So yeah, interesting answer.
Yeah,
All
and
right, Carl, final
we've had
question of the day. Oh,
we've had a couple that are, to your point, it's kind of this weird dichotomy of new fancy supercar versus classic. And we had a couple people that were like classic old. Somebody said
Yeah.
a Mustang, and so yeah. So on a more serious note, we kind of try, and again, one of our key pillars here is to educate. So what would you tell? We have this words of wisdom, kind of our last little wow question here, which is, what would you tell young Billy Joe, that 18-year-old, or what would you tell your boys? You wish somebody would have told you starting out that would have saved you a lot of grief, pain, headaches, failures, that we can share kind of with the world.
Yeah, I think, if I knew then, um, my level of effort has almost always had a direct correlation to my level of success, right? So I think if you work hard, you at least give yourself a fighting chance. And sadly, I think it seems to be that folks just expect things to be given to them or handed to them without putting in the work. So you can talk about luck and you can talk about things that, are out of your control. But the thing I can't control is how hard I work. And so, again, just thinking back, I wish, there were certain things that maybe I would have put more effort into and not make excuses about. And because it's easy to say I failed because of, something that was out of my control when there were probably things I could have done myself to help myself be more successful. So I think, again, your level of effort will really help determine your level of success. Talent is important, of course, and there's innate things that we're good at. But at the end of the day, man, you work hard, you give yourself a chance.
Yeah, I like that. Stan, did you watch that video I sent you, Jesse Eitzler video?
I think so.
The Billy Joe, it's interesting because do you know who Dave Goggins is?
Yep.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
he
he's the
talks.
motivational Navy guy, right? I know who he is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, big. I think it was Navy SEAL. I think he was the first guy to go through it 3 times, fail twice, and go through the third time and actually pass. But one
Mm.
of his things is, and it's on a video I shared with Stan today, or his concept, which talks, specifically what you're talking about. most of us, when we get to the point of where we're going to quit, we're at about 40% of capacity of
Mm.
what we can actually achieve. And he used a story with this Jesse Eisler guy, which was basically, hey, how many pull-ups can you do? And he did, like 6 or 7 pull-ups. He's like, all right, rest a minute. How many can you do now? And the guy did like 3 or 4. He's like, all right, rest a minute, doing it. And he basically said, all right, we're not leaving here. So in total, he had done like 10 or 12 pull-ups, which isn't a lot. The guy's a kind of an athlete, or at least a runner. And he said, we're not leaving here until you do 100 pull-ups. And he was like, his mind was blown because like, there's no way I can barely do 10 or 12. But basically, he just went around, took a break in between each one, and it took him a couple hours to complete the 100, not in a row, but 2 here, 3 here, whatever. But to your point of working, I think most of us give up before we know what our capacity is, right? There's so much left in the tank. And if you take that analogy and just what you said, like if we leave stuff in the tank just day to day, how much have we left in the tank over our 58 years, 54 years? How it's amazing. So I love your analogy of that hard work correlates to your level of success.
Sure.
All right. Well, Billy Joe, thank you so much, buddy. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to be on What Drives You. I will look forward to the next time I get to see you at the Gramercy. For those that are watching, if you're ever in the Austin area, the Gramercy is located in the beautiful town of Lakeway. I would suggest you go by. Chances are very good that you'll get to meet Billy Joe and some of the family there. Carl, appreciate you, buddy. Everybody else, we'll see you again on our next edition of What Drives You.
Thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate the time.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.